two very powerful stories. And we move so fast from the one with hosannas to the one with crucify him. They seem two very different stories. And sometimes we've wondered why we can't stay on Hosanna a little bit long. It was kind of fun to march around the church and to sing and to wave the palm branches, and then we so quickly move on. Why can't we leave Good Friday for Good Friday? There are some who say that this shape of our church liturgy could be a result of so many people who don't make it to Good Friday services, who would move just from Hosanna to the Easter Alleluia and miss this story. But I think they are together because they belong together. It is different scenes of one story. Of the story of the power of God versus the powers of this world. The story of the power of light versus that of darkness. And the Palm Sunday reading, the processional reading, brings that to us fully. At least it would if you were in Jerusalem that day. If you noticed at the beginning of this reading, Jesus sends his disciples in ahead of him and says, "Here's where you'll find the donkeys. They're there waiting for you." Jesus had planned this. He had set it up. He says, somebody asks you, just let them know that you're with me. Because riding in to Jerusalem that day from the west, there at the beginning of the week that was going to culminate in the Passover, coming from the west, riding in on a war stallion, leading Roman soldiers with their weapons glinting in the sun would have been Pilate, who didn't live in Jerusalem, lived in Caesarea over on the sea, but would come to Jerusalem the week of Passover every year to maintain control. The power of this world is processing in from the west, and from the east comes Jesus riding on a donkey. Jesus, knowing the prophecy that your king will come to you lowly and riding on a donkey. The power of God and the power of this world are coming face to face here in Jerusalem. And I think we read these both today because we live them both. The power of Jesus is the power of God, which is love, versus the power of this world, which is hate. The power of Jesus is the power of generosity versus the power of self-concern. The power of forgiveness is over against, I don't know, what keeps you from being able to forgive? Anger, resentment, sometimes fear. Palm Sunday sets this contrast for us. And we see it played out all week. And we see it played out every day. Whether it is our nation sounding very much like the Jewish people we hear in our story. We have to protect ourselves. God has brought us to a great point. We are beloved by God, and therefore we are able and called on to do what is necessary to protect ourselves. Or maybe we see it played out in the power of church institution that worries too often, too much about a financial figure and self-preservation. And we must still be here next year and 10 years from now, and we lose sight. We lose sight of the weak and the hungry and the despairing. We lose sight of the lost sheep that wanders today. Or maybe we find this played out in our own lives as individuals when we are Judas. When we move too fast from crying, Hosanna, because it lifts our spirit and it gives us hope, to that moment of betrayal, when maybe things aren't changing as fast or in the way we think they should, or greed. I don't know what moved him and what brought him to that. But when we move into those kind of territories, we move there ourselves. Or as Peter, when we are so sure that, yes, Lord, I will always follow you until it frightens me, and it may cost me. I don't know him. The power of God as love versus the power of this world in its fear, in its self-concern, in its hatred, in its resentment. This is the story that is this entire week that we move into once again in our hearts, but that we live in every day in our lives. It is very powerful to hear both of these stories this day. To listen all week as we move once again towards God's final answer to the powers of hatred, of fear, of self-concern. As we move towards, once again, reminding ourselves of God's final answer in an empty tomb. That the power of love is the power of God. That the power of forgiveness is a power greater than this world can almost bear to imagine. The power of eyes to see the least and the lost and the unlikely is the power of God to bring resurrection everywhere. So live with that story. The clashing of these powers, the way the world tells us that we must be in order to survive, and the way that God answers with the ultimate answer of a survival by love, by forgiveness, by light. It is the two stories of this day. It is the story of our everyday, as nation, as church, as individuals. Let us journey in the light.